Hello and welcome to TeleSUR English. I am Estefania Bravo from the headquarters of Quito, Ecuador. This is from the south. The Peruvian Congress is set to debate a new agricultural law after the continuous protests that have been generated by campesinos on the main roads of the country. The demonstrations began after the legislature was unable to approve the resolution demanded by the workers. The agrarian sector demands that the agro-export companies increase their salaries from $11 to $18 per day. The Parliament's Economic Commission announced that it plans to meet virtually on Saturday morning to find possible solutions to the conflicts that make the farmers impatient. The increase of the roadblocks in the region of La Libertad in northern Peru has caused the collapse of the local bridges. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro granted a pardon to a number of police officers who are in prison on charges of murder in the exercise of their duties. According to an official statement, the decree by President Jair Bolsonaro authorizes a pardon from criminal charges for all federal police, civilians, military, and firefighters who, in the exercise of their duties or as a consequence of them, have committed crimes, whether negligent or unintentional. This measure will also benefit those deprived of their freedom who have serious health problems, including pathologies such as AIDS or some type of cancer. This is the second consecutive year in which President Bolsonaro includes a pardon for agents, including the measure in a bill that was vetoed by Congress. And also in Brazil, it received a shipment of 5.5 million doses of Chinese COVID-19 vaccines, raising the total doses of the CoronaVac vaccine in the country to 10.8 million. The nation's state-run Butantan Institute on Wednesday announced that the CoronaVac vaccine developed by the private Chinese lab Sinovac Life Science achieved the levels of efficiency required by the World Health Organization in trials with 13,000 Brazilian volunteers. The state signed a contract with a Sinovac Life Science in June to develop the CoronaVac vaccine at the Butantan Institute, the main supplier of vaccines for the Brazilian Ministry of Health and the largest flu vaccine manufacturer in the Southern Hemisphere. The Institute of Economy of the Workers' Union of Paraguay prepared a report on the estimates of the population's economic process and inequality for 2021. The entity estimated that the fall in income as a result of the decline in employment will cause a sharp increase in poverty and inequality. Members of the institution pointed out that next year's estimates are not encouraging and the process of improvement in the labor market will be much slower. They also point out that although the economy will probably grow after the pandemic, it will not reach pre-pandemic levels throughout the year. Mexican health authorities registered 24 reactions to the COVID-19 vaccine developed by FTS. Undersecretary of Prevention and Health Promotion, Hugo López-Gatell, reported that the symptoms were decreased respiratory activity, low blood sugars, dizziness, laryngeal spasm, myalgia, arthralgia, and fever. However, the official explained that the reactions can be a natural immune response of the body. López-Gatell considered that some of these symptoms occurred because many people came to get the vaccine without having breakfast, so he recommended to eat before going to the immunization center. International organizations assure that Latin America and the Caribbean are experiencing the worst economic crisis in 120 years due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development said that the region will end 2020 with a 7.7% drop in gross domestic product, a projection previously announced by the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. The organization's reasoning refers to the economic consequences of the pandemic's impact on the sector marked by social inequality. ECLAC projected a significant growth of at least 10.7% in unemployment rate this year. This Friday, a motorhome exploded in downtown Nashville, injuring 3 people in what police described as an intentional act. The blast in the southern U.S. city left buildings and the road surface charred, as well as glass, tree branches, and bricks strewn across the street in an area filled with businesses, restaurants, and bars. In a dramatic sequence of events that shattered Christmas Day early morning, police responded to calls that gunshots had been fired and arrived on the scene before the vehicle erupted in flames. Police spokesman Don Aaron said their attention had been drawn to the suspicious RV in time for a bomb squad to clear the area before the explosion. The spokesman added that several people had been moved to a local station for questioning, although no arrest or details of suspects were announced. The FBI said it is taking the lead on the investigation.
The explosion was significant, as you can see from the street there on 2nd Avenue. Now, the police department, its federal partners, the FBI, ATF, are conducting a large-scale investigation to this point. We do believe that the explosion was an intentional act place throughout the day. Our police officers, with the assistance of the Tennessee Highway Patrol, are conducting a shutdown, if you will, of the downtown area while we assess this entire situation. So traffic in the downtown area from the interstate system really and in the immediate downtown area is going to be restricted as our teams attempt to assess exactly what's taken place, who may be involved, etc.
Energy Innovation CEO Hal Harvey said the U.S. will step up its commitment of eliminating carbon dioxide when President-elect Joe Biden takes office.
It's my opinion that Trump was a disaster on the environment. However, he was not very careful. And so almost every action he took can be reversed very quickly. So I think we will be back on track. I think we can think of this as 4 lost years, but we will recover. In the meantime, most energy and climate policy is decided state by state, and the states have very strong energy and climate policies. And then clean energy technology is getting cheaper. So we have actually made a lot of progress, even though we did not have any help from Washington. Most important way to think about energy and climate policy is sector by sector. So the easiest, fastest, and cheapest sector to reduce carbon, to eliminate carbon, is the electricity grid. And there are now many, many US utilities who are shutting down their coal plants and switching to solar and wind, and also geothermal and hydro and so forth. So there are commitments from many utilities to eliminate carbon dioxide altogether by 2035. And this is also the goal that President-elect Biden campaigned on. The next challenge is electric vehicles. If you have zero carbon electricity and an electric vehicle, then you have zero carbon transportation. And here there is what I would call a very healthy race between China and the United States. New vehicles, more and more of them sold, are electric. In California, they will not allow an internal combustion engine to be sold after 2035. I think China has something like a 60% EV sales by 2030.
And Donald Trump said he's working tirelessly for the American people with a schedule that included many meetings and calls, as he said, and then went to his golf club in West Palm Beach, Florida. In Washington, a Democratic proposal to increase direct payments to Americans under the COVID relief bill from $600 to $2,000 was blocked. The increase was Trump's own demand in a surprise video address on Tuesday night, but it was shut down by Republicans who opposed greater spending through stimulus talks. Should the relief bill fail, millions of Americans will be without desperately needed relief of at least until President-elect Joe Biden takes office in January. The House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, said Democrats would try again on Monday. Let's take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. Ethiopia's National Electoral Board reported that the postponed general elections due to the coronavirus pandemic will be held in June 2021. The Electoral Authority detailed that the general elections will be held on June 5th of next year, adding that the result will be known between the 6th and the 28th of June. Ethiopian government authorities said that the elections were to be held last August, but the health crisis sparked by COVID-19 and the rising tensions in Tigray region forced Parliament to postpone the election day Day for 2021. In Afghanistan, 2 police officers have been killed and 3 others injured after a series of explosions hit the capital, Kabul. The police said a magnetic bomb that was attached to a police vehicle detonated in western Kabul, resulting in the fatalities. The latest attacks came as Taliban and Afghan government negotiators held talks in Qatar, trying to hammer out a peace deal that could put an end to 2 decades of war. No one has immediately claimed responsibility for the attacks. Israel has carried out airstrikes on several sites in the Gaza Strip. The airstrike targets included a rocket manufacturing facility and training and a military post belonging to Hamas, the militant group ruling Gaza. According to media reports, the strikes caused damage to buildings in Gaza City, but no casualties have been reported. The attacks came after various rockets were fired on Friday towards the Israeli coastal city of Ashkelon. Israeli air defenses intercepted them, and while no Palestinian group in Gaza has claimed responsibility for the rocket fire, the incident broke months of cross-border calm. Syrian army air defense units repelled an Israeli airstrike against the Misyaf region located in Hama province. At exactly 12:40 local time, Israeli forces launched a missile blast from the north of the Lebanese city of Tripoli towards the Misyaf area. Syrian defense systems intercepted and shot down most of the missiles. Since the beginning of the conflict in Syria in 2011, Israeli bombings against military or civilian targets in the Levantine country are plentiful. Iraq's Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi and the UN Special Representative for Iraq, Janine Hennis Plastershirt, attended Christmas Eve Mass at Baghdad's Our Lady of Salvation Church in a show of support for the Christian community. Christians across Iraq have lived in fear for a decade since a 2010 attack on the church at a time when its Catholic congregation was celebrating Sunday Mass. The assault carried out by ISIS was the deadliest ever recorded against Iraq's Christians. 68 people were killed and 80 wounded. Al-Kadhimi said authorities were working hard to protect them and to return the displaced to their homes. The exact number of Christians in Iraq is unclear, but they are thought to be several hundred thousand.
The Muslim Christian Brotherhood in Iraq was and still is a model of fraternity and a standard for patriotism. We are working very hard to protect this respectable community and this blessed religion and to maintain its presence in Iraq. We are also working to bring back the displaced to their areas and support them so that they can settle and feel that they are the sons of this country.
On Friday, the Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, expressed his willingness to resign from his position if that is the will of the Armenian people. Pashinyan was willing to call early parliamentary elections in 2021 and emphasized that he would leave the position of Prime Minister if his political alliance was defeated. The Armenian president's declarations come after a new protest of the opposition in Yerevan, the capital of the country, in which dozens of people were arrested. The protest began after a ceasefire with Azerbaijan came into effect, an agreement that is rejected by the opposition and it is considered not very profitable for the country. In Belarus, President Alexander Lukashenko announced the dismantling of a terrorist organization that intended to perform an attack. President Lukashenko said the terrorist group, headed by opposition leader and businessman Nikolai Atujovic, trafficked tons of weapons through Ukraine and prepared terrorist attacks to overthrow him. Authorities reported that at least 8 members of the group were arrested, including the opposition leader. In this regard, the head of state praised the performance of Belarusian troops who found and neutralized the extremist. In western Russia, a fatal accident occurred this Friday on the highway between cities of Moscow and Volgograd. A bus veered into a ditch and overturned in the Ryazan region about 250 kilometers south of Moscow. At least 4 people died, including the bus driver, and at least 11, including several children, were hospitalized with injuries after the overnight crash. Police said the driver may have lost control of the bus after falling asleep.
According to preliminary information, a 32-year-old resident of Volgograd region lost control while driving a vehicle, drove into a ditch, and then got overturned. Unfortunately, it was kids who suffered the most. A 10-year-old boy and a 70-year-old girl, both patients were admitted to a regional children's hospital.
Let's take one last short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South, more news now. The first 9,750 doses of Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccines arrived in Greece on Friday through the Promohanas border station with Bulgaria. Inoculations will start on December 27th. The first will be performed in reference hospitals in Athens. Greece so far has imposed 2 nationwide lockdowns since the start of the pandemic. The first in the spring kept the country's infection rates low. Authorities ordered the second in response to a rapid post-summer rise in reported cases. As of Christmas Eve, Greece registered over 4,500 COVID-19 related deaths and nearly 135,000 infections. Residents of Madeira faced an unprecedented Christmas day with severe floods and rock slides causing damage in the north part of the Portuguese island. Local media reported that dozens of people were evacuated from their homes and at least one house was completely destroyed. So far, authorities have not accounted for any victims or missing people. Footage taken by a local firefighter from inside his car showed streams of water flooding roads and almost completely covering the cemetery nearby. In the UK, an outbreak of coronavirus was detected this Friday among the staff of the major British lab. The new cases were detected in the administrative staff and warehouse workers of 3 of the 4 scientific teams of the largest British lab in charge of testing for the virus. So far, the total number of affected people is unknown. However, currently 20 of the 70 workers remain isolated. Authorities of the institution estimate that the infections could be due to repeated violations of safety rules by the lab in order to respond to the growing demand and perform about 70,000 coronavirus tests per day. Ambassadors from the European Union's 27 nations convened on Christmas Day to start assessing the free trade deal the bloc struck with former member Britain, a historic accord that takes effect in just a week. At Friday's exceptional meeting, the EU delegations asked for more time to study the texts before sending them to lawmakers at the European Parliament. The ambassadors are expected to meet again on Monday. Both sides claimed the 2,000-page agreement protects their cherished goal. Britain said it gives the UK control over its money borders, laws and fishing grounds, while the EU says it protects its single market and contains safeguards to ensure that Britain does not unfairly undercut the bloc standards. The COVID-19 pandemic, which caused income decline and city lockdown in European countries, will trigger a €30 billion drop in Christmas spending in the UK, Germany and France. As a top holiday spender, the UK will see its Christmas retail sales dip to €80.9 billion from €91.5 billion last year. Spending in brick and mortar stores is also expected to plunge 37%. Germany, which is the second largest market of Christmas spending, will witness a €4.6 billion plunge this year due to lockdown measures. And France is expected to see the biggest drop in Christmas spending among the top 3 countries, with a slump of €13.2 billion after it reintroduced a lockdown in early November to curb the spread of COVID-19. Pope Francis used his Urbi et Orbi Christmas Day address to call on countries around the world to ensure COVID-19 vaccines are made available to those most in need of them.
Today, in this time of darkness and uncertainties for the pandemic, several lights of hope are appearing as the discoveries of vaccines. However, for those lights to lighten and bring hope to the whole world, they must be made available to everybody. We cannot allow that isolated nationalism forbid us to live as the true human family that we are. And we cannot allow the radical individualism virus to win above us and to make us indifferent to the sufferings of our brothers and sisters. I cannot put my own self ahead of others, putting market laws and inventions patents above the laws of love and health of humanity. I pray for all those in charge of nations, companies, international organizations to promote cooperation and not competition and look for a solution for everybody. Vaccines for everybody, especially for the most vulnerable and needy ones, in every region of the planet. At the first place, the most vulnerable and needed ones.
The Secretary General of the United Nations called on all nations of the world to create a global coalition for carbon neutrality.
War with nature. And nature strikes back, and strikes back with enormous fury. We all felt the consequences. In China, you had terrible weather events with dramatic impacts. But of course, China is a well-prepared country. It was much worse in countries less well-prepared in the African continent or small islands in the Pacific or the Caribbean, recently in Central America, devastating floods. So it's time to change course, but there is a hope. And let's build on that hope, and let's make sure that we create a global coalition next year, a global coalition for carbon neutrality, for net zero emissions in the middle of the century.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also be sure to follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram as well. And also be sure to follow me on Twitter at @ebravo_telesur. For TeleSUR English, I am Estefania Bravo. See you next time.